Hello and welcome to Caucasian Journal video interviews. Today we are talking about sustainable food systems. Our guests are Dr. Afton HALLORAN, a Denmark-based expert in sustainable foods transition, Elene SHATBERASHVILI from Elkana Biological Association, and Dr. Dmitry KOSTAROV, head of agricultural television channel Saperavi TV and independent winemaker. I would like to thank Afton HALLORAN for making this interview for us. And my first question is to Afton. We know that Nordic countries are among the leaders in sustainable food systems transition. Why is it so? And if you share a little bit of your knowledge and approaches to this problem, we would be very grateful.
Hi, my name is Afton HALLORAN and I'm an independent consultant in sustainable food systems transitions. I work with different organizations and agencies to understand how they can transform the food system. So when we talk about the food system, we need to talk about the different dimensions of the food system. For example, the human dimension, societal dimension, but also the economic dimension or the ecological or environmental dimension, even the political dimension. So when we consider all of these dimensions as a whole and how they influence food and what we produce and what we consume and everything in between, we see this as a system as a whole. So why is it so important to talk about the food system in the 21st century? Well, first of all, if we look at the environmental dimension or the ecological dimension, food systems, global food systems, are the largest single driver of environmental decline. And then when we look at it from a biodiversity perspective, we can see that food systems are the primary driver of biodiversity loss because of unsustainable forms of food production and the loss of habits, for example, through deforestation to create further cropland. When we look at it from a resource perspective or, and sustainable production and consumption patterns perspective, we also have to consider food waste. That globally 1/3 of food that's produced is lost or wasted. But also that when we waste this food along the value chain, we're also wasting resources. And about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions that are produced by humans are coming from food waste. And this is something that can be prevented from the get-go. So when we look at it from a human nutrition perspective or a societal perspective, we know that malnutrition is definitely a challenge on a global level. 1 out of 9 people go to bed hungry every day, still in the 21st century. But at the same time, 1 in 3 people are consuming too much food. And we have an issue related to non-communicable diseases such as obesity and also overweight on our hands in addition to into diabetes. So this is, again, a massive problem. And the fact that poor diets are claiming the lives of more than 8 million people globally, or basically 14% of the total deaths. This is a problem. Our diets should not be killing us. So when we look at society as a whole, we also see that within the food system, there's massive power imbalances, and many people don't have access to nutritious and high quality food that's culturally appropriate. So this is another reason why we need to pay attention to food systems. And we also know that about 80% of the world's poor live in rural areas and are highly dependent on agriculture. We know that smallholders' livelihoods, small-scale farmers, are very much dependent on this as a form of livelihood, but also they're much more susceptible to having their livelihoods threatened by climate change, for example. And the fact that also many people depend on the food industry for their livelihood, not just for agriculture, but also in terms of production, in the retail space, in terms of manufacturing, that this provides an income to many people. But many of these jobs are insecure, or that they are They provide a low wage, and so this is also, again, a concern within our analysis, overall analysis of the sustainability of food systems. So a lot of my current work focuses on the different entry points that we can find and identify within the food system that we can use to make interventions and in the end have see change and transformation within the food system. So together with colleagues from around the Nordic region, we've identified 8 different entry points that are applicable here to this region of the world, but can also be applicable in many other places. And so just before I get into this, it's important that we talk about contextuality. And again, when we identify the different entry points that work in a given country or in a given region of a country, it really has to be context specific. So I'll speak more in general terms now, so that this can perhaps be applied to a Georgian context, for example, or to other contexts in the world. So one of the areas where we see a very kind of strong point of intervention, or where we see a strong entry point, is around food environments. And so food environments are the physical and the digital and the social environments where we make decisions about our food. So this is from a consumption, kind of coming at it from a consumption angle. And so these environments are extremely important because they're affected by policy, they're affected by economic decisions, by socio-cultural decisions, and this in turn influences what we eat and how we eat. And so this could be, for example, how advertising it focuses mainly on unhealthy foods, and urging us and encouraging us to eat foods that are maybe high in salt, fat, and sugar, as opposed to focusing on the ones that are healthy for us. So if we can normalize food environments that encourage healthy and environmentally sustainable patterns, dietary patterns, this is one potential way that we can start to intervene in the system. And then, of course, from there, you would decide what exactly needs to be done. But certainly, this is something that that we've identified as important here in the Nordic region. Another issue is around circularity. And so there's a lot of talk about food waste and reducing waste in the food system, but circularity can also be brought up to another level. It's about recycling resources and the flows of resources. So if we understand byproducts, for example, not as something that's to be thrown away, but something that can be used and have value added to it, this is definitely going to enable us to move towards more sustainable food systems. Another issue, an entry point that we've identified, is around food culture and identity. This is something that is not static. This is something that is very much dynamic and that we can influence over time. And food culture is basically the combination of our preferences around the norms and the practices that influence what we produce, what we consume, and even what we throw away. So what we found here in the Nordic region is that food culture can be changed. And what we've seen over the last 15 years is that there's been a huge renaissance in terms of Nordic food culture. So the new Nordic food movement was something that was started by a group of chefs, and then you had support from the government to create this new Nordic food identity. And so we've seen this massive change over a very short period of time, and it's still happening. And it is something that, of course, will continue to evolve and change. So this is something that has been a really good example of what happens when you cooperate and collaborate with different parts of the system to restructure how we want to see our identity. So if we as globally, but also at smaller scale levels, can reassess our food cultures and identities and take the parts that are that lead to healthy and environmentally sustainable outcomes, socially sustainable outcomes, and also economically sustainable outcomes, we can help to restructure our food culture. So another entry point is around diet and meals. We know that on average here in the Nordic region, that the average diet is both unhealthy and also unsustainable in terms of environmental sustainability. So something needs to be done. One way of doing that is to look at dietary guidelines, and of course all countries would have those in relation to how they can be updated. Many countries now are moving towards including environmental sustainability, so looking at both human and planetary health in tandem. Another way of going at how to change dietary patterns and the way that we eat could also be through the public sector, so through school meals, through hospital meals, but also in the private sector, and looking at how to assist the private sector to offer more options that are healthier and more environmentally sustainable. So another entry point is around food supply chains. So currently most food supply chains are very long. We buy food from all sorts of different places in the world, and there really is a lack of transparency and traceability in supply. So if we were to make that more apparent and make transparency and objective, then it would be possible for us to really understand where our food has the largest impact. So if we are importing it from other places in the world, that are we actually outsourcing some of our environmental impacts to other places that maybe have more resource scarcity, including water. So the traceability aspect and transparency aspect will not only be important now, but well into the future. And this is also where technology can play a major role, and we've seen a lot of development there. Our other entry point looks at sustainable, resilient food production. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what that looks like because it varies between context, and there's so many different dimensions that would influence what is considered sustainable and resilient in terms of where you are in the world. You would need to consider the social, the environmental, and economic dimensions there, and also the trade-offs between these different dimensions when making a choice around what kinds of techniques and methods and forms of agriculture are the best. But we know that, at least from our assessments, is that the future will be governed by production systems that are taking ideas from traditional ways of doing things, but also combining them with new and maybe more high-tech ways of doing things. So both nature-based solutions and also high-tech solutions. And so that is part of kind of the inevitable future that we're heading towards. The second and last entry point that we've identified was around food production and food producers. So these food producers are in many ways an undervalued part of our society. These are the people who produce the food that we consume. And we know that more and more young people are not interested in going into agriculture anymore. So how do we actually encourage food production to be, one, a desirable livelihood, and two, something that we reward as a society? How do we make it attractive, sustainable, and respected? That's a big question, and of course we've seen here in the Nordic region that a lot of younger people who are gravitating towards food and agriculture sectors, they're interested in incorporating technology into their ventures. And of course that's showing up in other parts of the world too. And the final entry point is around cities, and we know that the majority of the world's population now live in urban centers. So cities can't be ignored when we talk about sustainable food systems. And so this could be, for example, changed or transformed through municipal interventions, through municipal governments, An example here from the city of Copenhagen is that the city has a strategy to offer more plant-based foods in public institutions, but also to lower the amount of waste that is being generated through the canteens and in the public sector. So this is one way that this can be changed and altered to encourage sustainable and healthy food systems. And in terms of Georgia, well, what a wonderful and interesting country, and one that I have yet to visit. But in terms of what you have existing in your food system, you have a massive tradition in both, food and agriculture, but also in winemaking. So in terms of looking ahead to the future, it's also important to build on the past and what are the things that have worked, the most resilient and sustainable forms of agriculture that you want to bring with you into the future. But also the cultural elements, the cultural parts of your society that you want to preserve and hang on to, but also develop upon as you move forward. So one day I do hope to come visit and just see the wonderful food systems that you have in the country, but also to meet the very interesting people there. But until then, thank you so much and for inviting me to chat with everyone, and looking forward to being in Georgia and coming to Georgia sometime soon.
Thank you very much, Afton, for your remarks, and let's just discuss what we have heard from you. I'm sure this is all quite relevant to Georgia, and perhaps Elene and Dmitry would like to comment on this and tell about the situation in our country.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. I represent Biological Farming Association Elkana. Elkana is an organization which works on organic farming and sustainable agriculture development since 1994 in Georgia. Why is sustainable food system approach relevant for Georgia? Because it applies to consumers, to producers, and it aims at changing the whole food system. And without changing in whole food system, we will not have sustainable change. In the case of Georgia, there are several entry points. From the producer's side, there is a need of awareness raising of the producers and informing them on the importance of what they do, because we have this legacy, the historical legacy, because of which farmers are more or less marginalized. The value of the knowledge is downgraded in farming systems. So in modern days, knowledge is the most important for food production and sustainable food production. On the other hand, it's very important that we look for new technologies, try to make the work of the farmer easier from a physical perspective, and improve the position of the farmer in a society as a person who really cares for the environment and for their consumers.
Thank you, Elene. I think you have just pointed the things which Afton was talking about. Traditional attitude to the farmers in Georgia, which might be a problem, and that we actually are facing the same problems as the Nordic countries have been facing. So I guess some of the approaches which the Nordic countries are using now might be quite applicable in our country. What do you think?
Yes, it is very important to be on time when we speak about sustainable food concept. And we see what changes are had been done in Nordic countries, and there is a high demand on the high quality food. So this is a good opportunity for Georgia to be one of the supplier for this. What we experienced, the problem, what Elene said, yes, unfortunately the demand on the high quality farmers in Georgia are very low. But at the same time, if we pay attention on these demands in the other countries, in developed countries, Georgia could take the very important place in this food supply chain. We have one of the best climate and ground and water condition in Georgia, so it means that we can produce such kind of food that other countries cannot do that.
What are the main problems from your viewpoint in Georgia? Is it this traditional thinking? And if it is the problem, perhaps the education should be the key solution. Or is it perhaps regulation, the governmental policies which might be adjusted to reflect what you say? Or perhaps is it insufficient financing?
Let's say that after the integration of the Soviet Union, there was a system. Right now we don't have this kind of system, and we have to build it up again.
You mean governmental regulation system?
Yes, governmental regulation system. That's we don't have the big players in our market right now. I can say that we have cows in our market, in our agriculture. We have a lot of more than 200,000 farmers, but they don't know what they should produce, what kind of quality the final product must be. But for example, mandarins, let's say, the average price for mandarins is about 30 tetri. It's less than 10 cents. If they have the quality, what the Nordic people are looking for, they will be ready to pay $1, maybe $2, maybe $3 per kilogram. But for this information, what our farmers doesn't have and what there is demand, so this kills our agriculture. So what we have to do, we have to provide with this information of our farmers. We have to invite good players, big players in our country. But there is another opportunity with such this concept. This is for high quality food. So we have to pay attention on this demand and don't lose our chance.
In terms of answer to your question, if we want sustainable food system, we have to make reforms and we have to make interventions from different triangles. Of course, the regulations and policies should be changed, but also it should include access to resources, information, financing, but also the food supply chains, market information, etc. And I would agree with Dmitry that the future of Georgian agriculture is in producing high quality organic products because of the climate conditions, because of our rich food tradition. This is our niche, this is our advantage. And that is why it's very important that the government policies or the programs which are elaborated have this vision. And of course, key is the information and knowledge. But then the other tools, support tools have to come in. And our vision also as an organization of agriculture development is that the Georgian production should not only focus on exports, because it's a kind of, so to say, very backward looking perspective that the producers are only export oriented. Export is very important, but in terms of sustainability, it's very important as well that we have a stable local markets, that local production has a serious niche in local consumption and diet if we want to influence, for example, the food habits and the connections of the consumers and the producers. This how you make the profession of the farmer more prestigious by connecting them with the consumers, by so that the consumers understand how much effort, how much intellect, how much idea is put in what is on their plate. And I think this is from where you start. And then you also have the vision of export. Again, it should be focused on high quality products. But it's very difficult because we currently, as Mr. Kostarov also mentioned, Georgian agriculture is very much scattered, and the product consolidation is a problem. The keeping quality of the product is a problem, and by introducing standards and sustainable production practices like organic production, we increase the comparative advantage of Georgian products. And another dimension is geographic indications or appellation d'origine. This is also very important because it shows the food culture of Georgia, that we have certain types of cheese, wine, and many other products which are really unique. We believe in our organization that this is the future of Georgian agriculture and Georgian production. And of course, this should be connected with coexistence of export orientation and the short local food chains, where consumers and producers work with each other, support each other, and it also will increase nutrition of the people in Georgia, because if you have products directly from the farm, they are more healthy, especially if they are organic products.
Dmitry, you are representing mass media, television, and Elena, you are representing civil society. What can be done from the point of view of civil society and from the point of view of mass media, perhaps, to improve the situation?
Our role is to provide our people with this information, that pay attention to what you are eating, pay attention to what your child is eating, and try to find the best quality food. And best quality food, this is a healthy food, this is organic food. Of course, technologies. We have to provide these technologies, trainings. A lot of work must be done, and this is our role in this activity.
Elkana is working, I already mentioned, more than 25 years is working on agricultural extension. One interesting initiative actually focused on the export market we have in the field of hazelnut production, where we work with the local association of smallholder hazelnut growers in Western Georgia, and help them to introduce internal control system for organic production. And this is an interesting example because this is the first example of such big internal control group of farmers who produce according to certain standards and criteria together, all of them.
And this is a very important step, because we have small farmers and it's very difficult for them to receive these certificates for organic production.
I am sure we shall continue our project and perhaps involve more experts from Western Union, because obviously this is quite important experience and is welcome and can be used in the South Caucasus as well.
Thank you very much, Afton, because you provide us with your point of view. But for us, yes, we are we're more deeply in practice, and you showed like more general view, and now it's, for example, me personally, I understood much more.
I think I have to say that I'm grateful to Afton for her brilliant input. We hope that in Georgia's sustainable food system approach will become more and more important in terms of political discussions.
Afton, thank you very much, and I hope we will see each other in person in Georgia very soon.
We cover what matters. Caucasian Journal.